Hey everybody, this is Mark, and welcome back to Beyond Profit, a global perspective. Bruce Springsteen, also known as The Boss, just dropped a new single, The Streets of Minneapolis, in response to the shooting of Renee Good and Alex Preddy on the streets of Minneapolis by ICE agents. Perhaps this isn't surprising that he did that. Springsteen has long been politically active. He's written political songs. He's made political statements. In this really incendiary moment, again, probably not totally surprising that he sort of jumped into the fray. I do think there are a lot of interesting questions, though, that come out of this announcement and the release of this song. One is the question is, where are the other celebrities, right? I mean, it seemed like for a long time celebrities were intervening in all kinds of things and trying to be influential, and certainly in the 2024 election. Where have they gone since Trump has been inaugurated? Second, there's a question of Springsteen's announcement of the single, that he's coming out and saying, look, this song's out here and here's why, right? That in itself is a political statement. Does anybody care? Does that really matter in any way? My third question is, what about the song itself? Is the song going to do anything to change people's attitudes or minds? So let's talk about it. All right, before we get into this, I want to thank you very much for watching this video and supporting this channel. Please like, share, subscribe. Really appreciate your support. I also am curious about your opinion on some of these things. Like, I'll tell you my opinion in a little bit as to why celebrities might be ducking out during the Trump era, or the second Trump era, if you will. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on that? And also, what are your thoughts about the influence of musicians and the songs that they write? Do they have the ability to change people's minds? Again, I can tell you my input on that, but I'm kind of curious to know maybe what some of you think. And do you have a favorite political song or favorite political artist, if you will, right? There's been lots of musicians over the years doing a lot of stuff like that. You know, I'm really fascinated by it. I've done some research on it. I would like to do a lot more on it in the future. And if it's something you want to talk about, then hey, let me know in the comments below, and we can make some more videos and have some more conversations about this. Now, when I originally started this channel, and I was thinking about the name Beyond Profit, a Global Perspective, I was thinking about a lot of different things that I could talk about. Obviously, I'm concerned about business and profit and whether or not businesses can do the right thing. That's a huge theme within politics as well, which is another area of study for me. But another thing that I study a lot is the entertainment industry, right? And the entertainment industry is an industry which equals profit. And they are huge. They make loads and loads of money. And so I'm always curious about the question about the motivations of some of the people who are involved in the industry, right? Are they doing what they're doing out of the goodness of their heart because they care? Are they doing it for profit? And so, again, like the effectiveness of these people who have a lot of money and a lot of power, but yet don't have political power is something that I'm always curious about. One of the things I was curious about too is whether or not Springsteen's new single was a charity single. Like, is he going to give away this money to some cause or whatever? Or is it something that's kind of a money-making operation, like a regular song would be? Or, you know, is it a song that might actually turn some people off and cost him money? Now, I don't really have answers to most of those questions, although I do know that, you know, it's not a charity single, best I can tell. He argues it's a protest song, so it seems like the idea behind it is to make an argument and try to change people's minds. There are others in the environment that are trying to raise money. Consider Tom Morello, for example, from Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine has always been a huge political band, from their lyrics to their approach to their protest style to everything they do. So again, not surprising that Tom Morello might do something, but apparently he's doing a concert to benefit the Good and Preddy families after the shooting. And again, not to criticize the boss about what he's doing. I'm really not cynical about this. I do tend to think that, you know, he really feels strongly about this and is probably sharing his opinion. But I do think, based on some of the things we're going to talk about, it's going to be an interesting question about whether or not this is actually going to be a net gain for him. He's got loads of money. He probably doesn't care. But let's get to that first question that I talked about in the introduction. And that is, why is it that celebrities perhaps aren't being as involved as they once were? Now, obviously, I already mentioned Tom Morello being involved. There are a few other people who have been outspoken. Bad Bunny, for example. Okay, so he actually has refused to tour in the United States because he believes that his tours would become targets for ICE agents to go and round people up and ship them away. And that's not probably without justification. As you know, the one exception to this rule is that Bad Bunny is going to be performing at the Super Bowl. And Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, has basically said they're going to have ICE agents crawling all over that place. So, maybe Bad Bunny's right about this. I'm also curious to find out whether or not Bad Bunny's going to say anything at the Super Bowl. Probably not. These are largely apolitical affairs. But who knows what's going to happen here? I mean, it could be in a couple of weeks I'm going to be back here talking about Bad Bunny. But it's not a prediction, but hey, you never know. But there are other people who have been outspoken recently too. Billie Eilish, for example, has argued that ICE is a government, federally funded terrorist organization. Olivia Rodrigo said that their actions are unconscionable, but there haven't been like loads and loads of people out there talking about this, or really talking a whole lot about the Trump administration since his inauguration in 2025. So why might that be? I think the first answer is you've got to look back at 2024 and what their experience was in the Harris campaign. Lots and lots of people came out, celebrities came out in support of her. In fact, I don't know how many interviews I did with how many media organizations. I think at last count there were like 50 or something like that, maybe more, that happened just within that election year of people saying, hey, does it matter? Does it matter? What's going to happen with all of this? And I think that these celebrities discovered something that I kept telling these interviewers, is that it probably won't make any difference. And I don't mean to sound negative or anything, and it certainly was not the answer that a lot of newscasters wanted to hear, but look, when people are advocating on behalf of candidates, it's different than coming out and being for or against an issue, and that people are partisan and they tend to sometimes be really locked in on certain candidates. And not only does it not matter a lot of times when you endorse one candidate or another, but it might actually create kind of a knee-jerk situation. So I did some research on Taylor Swift during that election year with a couple of my colleagues, Allison Shortle and Brooklyn Walker. And we did this, it was a pretty large study, and we discovered that if Taylor Swift argued hypothetically that you should vote Democrat, then it had no effect on Republicans, big surprise. It really had no effect on Democrats either, because they were already going to vote Democrat anyway. I mean, they had Swifties for Harris before she even made her endorsement. But among independents, that endorsement did matter, but it actually made people less likely to want to vote Democrat. Now, I'm not sure that that's true for all candidates, or I should say all celebrities all the time, but it just illustrates the difficulty of any individual celebrity making a difference. Plus, when you have seas of these celebrities on both sides, I mean, keep in mind, Trump had Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan and a bunch of other people too. I mean, when you have people on both sides of the issue, I can't say it washes out, but it makes it very difficult to determine whether or not there's any impact at all. And so by the time you come around and these people were so optimistic and desperately trying to support Kamala Harris, and she didn't win, Trump comes along and becomes the president, I really think that a lot of these people were like, is it even worth saying anything in this environment? Because I may just be wasting my breath, maybe even alienating my fan base. So the second question is Springsteen's statement about his song, the introduction of this song into the public space, is it going to matter? Now, the first thing that I think is interesting and important is that when Springsteen talks, people listen, right? When the boss talks, people listen, and that's completely consistent with all of the research that I've done on celebrity influence. When celebrities start talking, the media just comes in droves, and they pay attention to, like, ooh, look, there's somebody talking about politics. That's interesting, and that'll create more clicks, so they're going to cover it. And they don't have to agree with Springsteen. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It doesn't really matter. I mean, as I've said so many times when I've talked about media, it's really all about the money. And so whatever it takes in order to get eyes on their content in a very fast-paced media environment where stories just are constantly turned over, throwing a celebrity in there is a great way to grab attention for your news organization, which means that Springsteen gets a platform pretty easily, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to agree with what he says. All it means is that he gets to have that message amplified. And so when he's talking about the shootings of these people and being critical of ICE, that's a message that more people are going to hear than heard it before. Does it matter? I mean, this is already a very, very high-profile news story. It's being covered constantly. I think it would be unusual that people probably wouldn't know what's going on, which means that, especially in this political environment, it's kind of like supporting a candidate one way or another. People are probably going to be pretty well set in on their views about things, and there may be a few people who are persuadable, but maybe not many. And that's one thing that, again, my research has revealed is just like with candidates, I mean, polemic issues are not winners when it comes for celebrity endorsement. They can be quite influential and quite persuasive on a whole range of issues, but when it comes to stuff like, say, gun control or abortion or whatever, you know, people are pretty well set in, they have strong opinions, and they're not going to have their minds changed. And I have a feeling that this is probably one of those issues. Another thing to think about is Springsteen himself. How actually influential is he today, and with whom? I mean, honestly, like, I think there's a lot of younger people where you talk about Bruce Springsteen, they're like, who's that? Or, oh, that's that guy that my dad likes to listen to. I mean, I'm sorry, Bruce, I'm sorry, boss, but like, I respect you, I respect your art, but you know, you're not as cool probably with the young people as you used to be. Now, you're still cool and influential with a lot of people who are like my age and older. So are you going to be influential with me? You're going to be influential with other people who are like me? That could be. So when you're looking at celebrities, sometimes you have to also look at, you know, what the demographic is. Now I will say this, when I was doing research for my book, I actually was curious about the influence of Bruce Springsteen in terms of how he was perceived versus other politicians. So I did a credibility study. And what I did is I lined up several prominent politicians, including the president, compared it to the credibility of a number of celebrities across a lot of issues. And Springsteen was one of them. And the measure that I had on him, the category I should say, was on the issue of income equality. So it doesn't really have to do with the shooting thing, but I still think it's an interesting story to tell and it's interesting data. So when I looked at everybody across the board without regard to political party or age or anything like that, Springsteen was not as credible on that particular issue as were most politicians, but he was more influential than Donald Trump. So gotta ask, hey, who's the real boss here, right? But I digress. When you looked at the data on just independents, then Springsteen jumps up to number 2 on the list and is higher than not just Trump, but a whole lot of other garden variety politicians. Again, to be clear, this isn't about any shootings in Minneapolis. It is about the issue of income inequality, which a lot of people have pretty strong opinions about, but it might not be quite as clear as something like, say, gun control, gun rights, or anything like that. So he did, at least at that time, several years ago, seem to be credible, at least on that issue. Is it possible that he might be credible on this issue? I don't have any data on that, but I don't think it's unreasonable to argue that maybe among independents or maybe among people of a certain demographic, he might be. But it's also important to remember the Taylor Swift example, that just because somebody comes out and supports something doesn't mean that people are going to support them. They may, in some situations, knee-jerk against that. Now, why do they knee-jerk against Taylor Swift? I don't have absolute data on that, but I will say there have been some studies done on brand match. So quite a few years ago, there was a famous actor-singer called Jessica Simpson, and there was a study done on her ability to advertise certain products. So hypothetically, we discover that Jessica Simpson is great at selling perfume, but horrible at selling pocket knives. So that tells you a little bit about brand match. that if celebrities are good at selling one thing and not another, it doesn't mean that they don't have influence. It just means that you have to find the right category where they are influential. And I wonder with the Taylor Swift situation, I mean, she's super famous and super influential with, Swifties and you name it, but if people don't see her as a brand match for a political endorsement, then they may just knee-jerk against her in that situation. Is Bruce Springsteen good for brand match when it comes to political endorsements? Well, he's had a long history of being politically involved. He's got some credibility. He's done some songs. My guess is he may seem more credible, at least to certain audiences, than Taylor Swift does, who was a little bit newer to the game, although oftentimes very outspoken. But that's just a guess. That's a hypothesis. I'd be curious to see if there's more data. I am speculating a bit, but it is based on real data, so I think it's a fair speculation. It's an interesting question anyway. So the third question is the question of whether or not the song matters. And I really think that's a separate question from the announcement. You can come out and make political statements, but the content that was created, right, that is a piece of art. And how that affects people is its own sort of experience. It's its own thing. So obviously there have been hundreds, thousands of songs written through the ages that have been politically oriented and fall into what I would consider to be different categories, right? There's sort of vague anthemic things like the Beatles' All You Need Is Love, which is sort of soft and cushy and, says wonderful things but really doesn't take a stance on anything particularly. You have songs like This Land Is Your Land, written by Woody Guthrie, which seem patriotic but are really satirical and was actually critical of the United States. And so that's very clever, but that's also another approach. You also sometimes have some that are much more direct. I think about Only a Pawn in Their Game by Bob Dylan, which was released in response to the killing of Medgar Evers. Dylan at that time advanced this idea that folk songs should just be drawn from the headlines. And so in that way, it's very similar to what Springsteen is doing. But I think an even closer analogy to this, though, is a song called Ohio, released by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young after the Kent State shooting. I might remind you that this isn't the first time that the government has shot at its own people, right? There's a long history of this, but in reference to the specific song, at Kent State, there were 4 people who were shot, basically peaceful protesters, and it's a very similar situation like this. Neil Young, the author of the song, threw out this song in a day or two, and the whole song was out probably within a week. It was very, very immediate and visceral and just came out. And just like Springsteen, who says, hey, Alex Preddy got shot, wrote the song the next day, it's going to be out a couple days later. It was just out like rapid fire. Now, there is a sort of if you want to analyze it, there are differences between Springsteen and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. At that time, they were the young people who were part of the vanguard of a political movement which was not only anti-Vietnam, but had a whole lot of other issues involved in it as well. And there were lots of people who were outspoken. At this time, certainly there's a lot of people who are protesting. We haven't seen this level of protest probably since that particular time. But Springsteen is not one of the young people in his generation. Again, we talk about that demographic. He does have influence, but with whom? I don't have the evidence on that specifically, but it's not like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, where it's pretty clear that they were influential with that particular group of people at that time. Another similarity is that, like Only a Pawn in Their Game, it and Ohio are ripped from the headlines, but they also name drop the president, right? When in the song Ohio, it's 10 soldiers and Nixon's coming, we're finally on our own. And in Springsteen's song, he's talking about King Trump. And so, again, very direct attacks on the president. Do these songs actually change anybody's minds, though? And I would say that really kind of depends on the environment. I have done some research on this. I do have some data. And I'm not the only one. There's loads of people who have researched the impact of music on people's minds and people's behavior. I focus more on it on political behavior. But I will say that, like, if you put people in a certain environment with friends or other people or concert situations, then it can actually really influence people's feelings. Now, whether or not that's going to affect long-term attitudinal change, I'm not absolutely sure, but I will say that people's feelings about issues, even people's feelings about candidates, can change based on the music that is played. Like, one of the studies that I did was on the campaign between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I looked at the music that was played at their respective party conventions and the way that it made people feel when people watched those videos. And it did create senses of positive feelings for one candidate and negative feelings about the other candidates. You know, you can check out the research. It's a little more nuanced than that, but there was definitely an effect by the music. Just last year, during or I should say 2 years ago now, 2024, during the campaign, there were some people interviewing me about whether or not Trump basically playing DJ at his own rallies and sometimes like losing the message and just playing music, whether or not people were going to think he was crazy for that. And I thought, look, some people think he's crazy anyway, and you're not going to change those people's minds. But the people who are actually there watching Trump speak, they're getting carried away by the music. They're being influenced by that. They're having feelings and connections. And my argument was, which wasn't a very popular one at the time, is that this kind of stuff might actually be helping Trump and not hurting him. And so music sometimes does things, irrational things, that affect people's feelings and beliefs and all sorts of stuff. Now, will this particular song make an impact? I don't know. I mean, if Springsteen is doing it in concert and he's having sort of a moment with his people, yeah, it might affect the way people feel. Or if people really listen to the song carefully and ingest it, so on, probably not the lyrics itself, but the music as well, you know, that might affect people. Do I have any data on that? No. But is it possible? Yes. Short answers to my questions, right? Why aren't celebrities getting more involved? They're probably just discovering that they're not nearly as powerful as they thought they were, although they can be in certain ways in certain issues. Second, does Springsteen's message matter? Probably does with some people, but there are already so many people's attitudes set about this, it may be just marginal, if anything at all. And will the song make a difference? Hard to know. Again, I would argue in certain circumstances it's quite possible, but in some sort of a mass sense, probably not. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned a lot. Please leave some comments down below if you have questions or things you want to talk about, or certainly things you want to argue about with me. I mean, hey, I'm always about like hearing other people's points of view, but please drop a message, and I'll see you next time.